It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Andrii Buvailo, who is a director of Deep Pharma Intelligence and co-founder of Biopharma Trend. Andrii holds a PhD in physical chemistry. He's an industry expert in AI and pharma. He publishes extensively, including in Forbes, and his works have been widely cited, including by Deloitte. Andrii will cover the top deals, collaborations, and partnerships in AI and pharma in 2020 and Q1 of 2021. Andrii, welcome.
Thank you very much, Kate, for the introduction. It's my great pleasure to be talking today at this wonderful event. And as Kate mentioned, I'm leading Deep Pharma Intelligence, which is a joint venture between Deep Knowledge Analytics, the leading UK analytics hub, and Biopharma Trend, of which I am the co-founder. Biopharma Trend has been on the market since 2016, providing great insights into the emerging areas of the biotech industry. Today, I'd like to go over some highlights and our findings from a recent report, Pharmaceutical Artificial Intelligence Deals and Market 2020-2021. The report can be downloaded on our website following the link on the slide. It is extremely important to mention, I guess, that the last year was a paradoxical year for the biotech community because actually the pandemics affected a lot of industries. Pretty much the whole world was shut down, and a lot of business and R&D disruptions happened everywhere. But the biotech industry was on the rise nonetheless. In fact, it was booming. The IPO deal activity hit its all-time record high in 2020, and biotech stock index as well hit its all-time high. The venture capital was pouring into new ventures, and not necessarily related to COVID, but actually in pretty much every therapeutics area. And in fact, FDA approved 53 new medicines, which is kind of a very productive year for the approvals. And AI and drug discovery sector has been growing as well. And a lot of highly priced IPOs happened, and around $2 billion was spent in venture capital allocation to fund biotech companies. And a lot of R&D deals were happening in the area, basically illustrating the demand for the new technology. So the community of the artificial intelligence is pretty diverse these days. It is represented by largest pharma corporations, which are developing in-house programs actively. Pretty much everybody is doing this right now. And also a lot of biotech startups, more than 250 companies right now actively operating in this area and collaborating with pharma companies and all the other players. We also have CROs, which are quite active in the application of AI, and they're kind of competing with the big pharma corporations because they try to apply AI to improve their value offering. And also we have newcomers such as big tech corporations, Google, Tencent, Baidu, and others, who are essentially leveraging their cutting-edge technology and entering into new space for them, but they leverage the computational resources to rapidly expand into healthcare. So the interest of big pharma companies towards the AI technologies is reflected by a growing number of AI deals, and in fact 2020 was kind of a busy year in this regard, with at least 30 major deals recorded, and a lot more smaller deals, probably hundreds of deals on a much smaller scale. And of course, it's important to note why it's happening. Why is this interest towards the application of AI is so growing? In fact, the AI is an old concept which originated in the middle of the last century, and a lot of theory has been available by 2020s. But probably, basically, because of the lack of computational power, computational resources, and many other technologies auxiliary to the AI were absent in last century, it was not possible for the technology to actually gain the commercial value at the scale. And things started to change around a decade ago, when essentially substantial advances in deep learning happened with the ImageNet competition. And then several years later, a new infrastructure for neural nets and new algorithms emerged, like, for example, generative adversarial networks, which provided for the ability to do generative chemistry at a new level. And then in 2018, 2019, a number of substantial discoveries in heat discovery space happened, which brought major validation for the AI technology, showing everyone that essentially the technology is already mature enough to disrupt the usual way the drugs are discovered. And the technology keeps maturing till these days. So the landscape of the collaborations is quite diverse, and we have some already formed the leading pack of the big pharma companies who very intensively collaborate with third-party biotech companies, trying to probe the grounds in various aspects of AI application, all the way from heat discovery to target identification, building ontologies for diseases, and all the way to clinical trials, where AI is used not only to operational stuff, like, for example, finding the right patients for the clinical trials, but also for trying to get the success rates, predict the success rates of clinical trials, essentially saving costs and assessing risks. So among the leaders, we have Pfizer, Bayer, Johnson & Johnson, Roche, AstraZeneca, and others. And but the dynamics of this graph is changing rapidly, with pretty much every month a new collaboration happening in the area. So here's just several examples of collaborations which basically illustrate the trend. And as you can see, it's some of the collaborations have up to $1 billion in possible royalty payments and multi-million advance payment checks. So this area is kind of well funded in this regard. So the venture capital area is also very crowded, and here just a brief overview of major rounds raised by AI biotechs over 2020 and 2021, essentially with such heavy hitters like Xtalpi with more than 300 million raised, Valo Health with 190 million raised just weeks ago, and others. You can, by the way, find more information about venture deals by requesting access to our analytics platform, where we have been tracking the data on this for the last, I guess, 5 to 7 years. Among the IPO, there is 7 IPOs that happened in this space, including companies like oncology-focused Lantern Pharma, Relay Therapeutics, Epsilera, very well-known IPO was done by Schrödinger. And by the way, Accelera Schrödinger were really high on the valuation of their IPOs. In the merger and acquisition space, the number of deals is smaller, but still quite significant. And for example, Nanotherapeutics was acquired by Astellas, and Haystack Sciences was acquired by In Sitro. And just days ago, Rovian Sciences absorbed Silicon Therapeutics for as much as 150 million. And again, I suggest you visit our platform to learn more about this and other collaborations. If we see the list of leading pharma companies by the amount of collaborations, we have seen one picture several slides back, but if we add information about VC investments by big pharma corporations, which they typically do through their VC arms, and M&A activities of the pharma companies, then the list a little bit different now, but not that much. Still, we have Pfizer, Bayer, Roche, Johnson & Johnson among some of the leading companies in adopting AI technology for drug discovery and clinical research. Here's another part of data on this. And again, as I mentioned, the collaborations are focusing on the whole spectrum of research process, starting from the very beginning, from mining data from literature and building ontologies on the diseases, finding new targets, etc., and all the way to hit discovery, lead optimization, preclinical studies, some of them are also enabled by AI technologies, and even clinical trials. But it is very extremely important to note that new kind of players are entering the biopharmaceutical space. I would say not traditional players. These are the companies that are enabled primarily by AI technology. These include big tech corporations like, for example, Google, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and they are very rapidly investing in biotech startups, or they are offering their computational resources to pharma companies and basically making strategic partnerships. And as well, they are trying to kind of apply their computational resources to very basic biology research, like, for example, Google's DeepMind applying AI for solving the 50-year grand problem in biology and predicting the conformation of the proteins. Another type of players that is quite unusual and was not available like some, I guess, 10 years ago is some remote robotized labs, which are basically a new way to do research remotely. Essentially, these kind of players bring robotized lab infrastructure through the cloud analytical data infrastructure, where you can essentially send instructions about some experiments, and then the lab can perform experiments and even optimize experiments using predictive analytics and AI. And it's very important also to know to mention big data providers. The AI thrives on data, and when pharma companies are adopting AI as a new tech, essentially they become kind of dependent on the providers of data, because a lot of data now becomes available for the drug discovery research, like data from healthcare wearables, mobile applications. This is data from electronic health records and various biobanks, and a lot of data from pharmacovigilance studies, and etc. And this data was not really used on a big scale earlier without AI, but now this data becomes gold for the pharmaceutical research. And so such providers of big data becoming essentially strategic partners to do research. And finally, infrastructure providers, which is primarily the cloud infrastructure providers. And the biggest, I guess, the biggest example is Amazon Virtual Machines. This is, but also Microsoft Cloud and other providers, which are now powering most of the analytics projects by healthcare companies, by AI, by pharma companies. And again, this technology becomes essential for the whole thing to work, because AI can thrive on data, but the only way you can do AI project is essentially on some elastic cloud infrastructure. It's very interesting to see how the landscape of collaborations looks like if we talk about big tech corporations. And so as we see, there are a number of collaborations between big tech and big pharma, where they sort of trying to combine drug discovery expertise with infrastructure and AI expertise of big tech, and also a lot of collaborations in terms of big tech companies working with smaller biotechs or drug design boutiques. Big tech companies are also kind of significantly investing in the companies in this space, and also there is not a lot, but several merger and acquisition deals that also occurred in recent years. Just to illustrate this new commerce and the type of deals that are now happening in this space, there's in terms of computational infrastructure, for example, there's Takeda, which partner with Amazon Web Services, and essentially using their infrastructure for their projects. Or recently, Eli Lilly and Strateos collaborated to essentially launch remote control robotic cloud lab. And Strateos, among the first labs of this kind, which is bringing the pharma to a new level of robotization. And also big data providers, this trend of working with them dates back like for several years now. GSK, Roche, AstraZeneca, Amgen, and other companies, they actually started kind of trying to leverage this big data sources quite some time ago in the anticipation of the new AI disruption. But AI is not just a tool to improve research, it is an enabler of new business models. And what I mean by that is that the AI is not just an incremental, informatics tool to do some particular stuff, but it is actually a changer of the way the R&D is done in general on the level of the organization. And I will describe several trends in this kind of model restructuring, business model restructuring. First of all, there is a new wave of CROs, CROs of new kind, I would say. This is biotech companies that started building some time ago, started building AI tools, and by now they built essentially the complete infrastructure and end-to-end systems where every process, all the stages of the process, starting from literature, analyzing literature, building concepts, and then identifying targets, discovering hits, and then proceeding to lead discovery and drug candidates. Essentially, it's done in one system, in one modular approach, where data essentially flows forth and back, and some learning process occurs. Just several examples of such companies like Insilico, Genomics, Hills, who actually build such kind of systems. And for example, Insilico just announced a major discovery of a new target and a novel molecule for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And this was done in under 18 months at a low cost. And essentially, it was done using this kind of new AI system, end-to-end system. The next business model change, I already mentioned, this robotized cloud-based labs. I mean, the real labs which are remotely controlled, and the data is essentially analyzed in the cloud, and everything in terms of data processing, data manipulation, and analytics is done in the cloud. But the real experiment is actually done in labs remotely, instructed by the partners. And in this kind of way, it starts again with very basic instruction, might start with actual hit discovery program, and then some experiments can be performed. So this is the new wave of technology, and this is something that will be dominating the industry in some 5 to 10 years. This is just one example of such collaboration just recently in January, and a number of companies that are doing this kind of stuff. And finally, there is another very interesting thing that AI brings in terms of collaboration. It basically enables training using federated learning. It is now possible to start training models on shared data without actually compromising data. This one example is a MELLODDY project, which brought together a number of pharma collaborators, all of whom basically provided their data for the training, but they didn't expose data to competitors. This is only possible with the edge computing in principle, essentially the idea behind federated learning principle, where the global model is trained on local instances, and then only the results of training are basically brought back to the global server. And so each data on the local machines stays secret and is not shared. But the global server can be used in this case for the benefit of everybody involved in the whole collaboration. So key takeaways from this presentation are that essentially probably the most interesting thing in this area that a lot of newcomers are entering the pharma space, and new types of CROs emerge, not just functional CROs like some 20 years before, but actually CROs which do AI as a service for big pharma and biotech companies. And also big tech corporations. This is a kind of new beast in this forest, and also infrastructure providers, which are not just providers of services, but they become quite strategic partners for making things happen in the long run. Now, a new kind of partnerships and models for collaboration emerge, like federated learning, for example. So concluding this presentation, essentially, I would say that the pharma industry is going to kind of, platform-driven R&D, where a lot of things are happening in the AI-controlled fashion on the vertically integrated business model, essential, where data basically flows between different partners, departments, etc., and it is used in the learning loops where it can be improved upon by successive experiments and then learning model based on the data obtained. Of course, this means that collaboration in general becomes a new norm in the pharma industry. It now is much more diversified because it is impossible to build this kind of global infrastructure, including big data, AI, clouds, servers, and everything, without extensively collaborating with peers from technology industries and etc. And so this is kind of a new ecosystem that we now see being built in the pharmaceutical space. So in order to get more insights about the things, I would encourage you to reach out to us for our proprietary analytics services, where we essentially have much more insights on all this data and trends. And also, there's a little a little intro to our upcoming reports that are going to be published in a couple of months, and they will primarily focus on stem cells, healthcare landscape overview. Then we will expand on the application of AI in oncology area, quite interesting findings there. And then we will review more closely technology companies that are now entering and redefining the pharma industry. And of course, we will soon publish our updated landscape report summarizing the AI ecosystem in general. And we are, with that, concluding the presentation, and I'd like to say that we are open for strategic collaborations on joint analytics and industry rating reports. So welcome to reach us to participate in some of the reports and help us create better reports by sharing some insights, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrii. It's been very insightful, and 2020 was indeed a remarkable year for biotech. I have to apologize to the audience because I've experienced the unexpected technical difficulties with my headphones and microphone. So I understand that not everyone can hear me well. So I will therefore ask my colleague Franco Cortez to step in now, assuming that I continue to have quality of the sound issues.
Sure, it would be my pleasure entirely, Kate. Hello, everyone. I'm a colleague of Kate's. My name is Franco Cortez, and I'm Director of Aging Analytics Agency, the longevity-focused analytical subsidiary of Deep Knowledge Group. My apologies, Kate, for these unforeseen hardware issues. I've been witness personally to your gracious moderation skills, and I was very much looking forward to your moderation of the roundtable later today, but I'll do my best to fill in. I'm sure it won't be half as good as what you would have done, but c'est la vie. So thank you, Andrii, for that very insightful presentation. That was great. I do have a question for you, if you're open to questions. So it's clear that the overall volume of collaborations in the pharma AI space is heating up a lot. What are some of the foremost challenges, you would say, for pharma corporations in particular in onboarding these AI technologies and techniques in their R&D programs?
Well, thank you, Franco, for the question. Yeah, indeed, indeed, there are challenges, and I would say one of them relates to scarcity in talent, because AI is a kind of new thing, and especially when it is applied to such domain-specific area as drug discovery, it is a even much harder task to do. And generally, it is known that the market of the specialists who can do this, or especially who can lead project like that with global vision, is fairly competitive. And you have to kind of take into account that big tech companies are now aggressively competing for this talent, and smaller biotechs and entrepreneurial ventures are also competing and offering quite lofty conditions for such specialists. So big pharma is essentially competing now with quite an ecosystem of players for the talent. This is one issue that comes to my mind.
Okay, well, if there are any pharma executives in attendance today, I'd say that that's a pretty actionable key point to take away with you. Thank you, Andrii. Quite insightful indeed.